I'm standing in a courthouse parking lot watching strangers bid on my house. $15,000 going once. The auctioneer's voice echoes off the concrete. How did I get here? My HOA president, Linda Crawford, decided that the windows she personally approved were suddenly illegal. She thought she could destroy my life over home improvements I'd written permission for. But Linda made one fatal mistake. She didn't know I'd document everything. Every lie, every threat, every violation notice from those miserable community center meetings. Fast forward 5 years, I'm holding a $75,000 check. Guess whose signature is on it? That's right, Linda Crawford herself. She had absolutely no idea what she'd started when she messed with the wrong electrician. So, what would you do if your HOA tried to steal your house over approved renovations? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Let's see how far this story spreads. My name is David Martinez, 48 years old, union electrician, and I thought I understood power. Turns out I knew nothing about the kind of power that comes with a gavel and a grudge. After my wife's death from cancer, I needed somewhere peaceful for my son Jake's recovery. My 14-year-old boy was already dealing with enough grief. I wanted sanctuary. Maplewood Heights looked perfect. Tree-lined streets, front porch swings, the sound of lawnmowers on Saturday mornings. The house needed work, but that's what I do best. Those original 1975 windows were hemorrhaging heat every winter. Single-pane aluminum disasters that basically invited winter inside. I researched replacements for weeks. Double-pane vinyl, energy-efficient, neighborhood-appropriate style. Here's where I made my first mistake. I followed the rules. I submitted my architectural request like a responsible homeowner. Photos, specifications, contractor licenses, the complete package. The HOA had 45 days to respond. On day 42, I received my approval letter. Request approved for window replacement installation. Clear as crystal, signed by the Architectural Review Committee. Professional installation, city permits, final inspection, everything by the book. Those windows looked incredible and slashed my heating bills by 60%. For exactly 18 days, I thought I'd beaten the system. Then Linda Crawford decided to ruin my life. Linda was our HOA president, and she ran Maplewood like her personal kingdom. Insurance adjuster by day, neighborhood dictator by night. Picture someone who'd turn a homeowners association into a weapon because she got off on other people's misery. Short gray hair like steel wool, clipboard like a sword, voice that could strip paint. I was grilling steaks for Jake when my phone rang. Mr. Martinez, your unauthorized window modifications violate community standards. Linda, I have written approval right here. Approval was subject to board ratification. I stared at my letter, no conditions mentioned anywhere. Where does it say that? Click. Dial tone. Thursday night, I walked into that community center with my approval letter in justified anger. Biggest mistake of my life. The place reeked of burnt coffee and broken dreams. Linda sat behind a card table like she was judging war criminals. Your window installation violates aesthetic guidelines, she announced, sliding a violation notice across the table like a death warrant. I held up my approval. You already said yes. Approval doesn't guarantee compliance. Her pen scratched another form with the sound of bureaucratic vengeance. $750 fine, 45 days to pay. $750 for following their own rules. I looked around at my neighbors, every face turned away. The silence was deafening. That's when it clicked. Linda wasn't enforcing standards, she was making statements. The violation notice came with threats wrapped in legal jargon. Fines compound monthly until compliance. I calculated the financial apocalypse Linda had unleashed that night. Month 1, $750. Month 2, $1,500. Month 3, $3,000. My post-cancer budget couldn't survive this progression. Attorneys wanted $8,000 up front just to review the case. I was staring at financial ruin either way. Pay Linda's escalating extortion, or pay lawyers to fight her. But here's what Linda didn't understand about electricians. We trace problems to their source. When power fails, we follow every connection until we find the break. And I was about to discover that Linda Crawford had been breaking this entire neighborhood for years. The real revelation, while researching my defense, I drove around Maplewood counting identical window replacements. 52 houses with the exact same vinyl windows I'd installed. 52 neighbors who'd never received violation notices. Linda wasn't enforcing community guidelines. She was operating a shakedown racket, and I'd just become her newest victim. The question was, what made me different from those other 52 homeowners? I was about to find out, and the answer would flip everything. Linda's retaliation was swift and vicious. 3 weeks after challenging her at that community meeting, I found a certified letter lurking like a poisonous spider in my mailbox. Property line notice for $3,000. My hands literally trembled reading the itemization. The original $750 fine had somehow multiplied into a financial nightmare. Late penalties, administrative fees, collection costs. Linda had weaponized paperwork itself, but the real gut punch was buried in Section 4. Failure to satisfy lien may result in foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure over windows she'd personally approved. I called Betty Rodriguez that evening, my 68-year-old neighbor who maintained the most pristine rose garden in Maplewood. Her voice quivered when she answered, and I knew Linda had targeted her too. "Oh, David, I was praying you'd call. Linda visited yesterday asking questions about your financial stability, whether Jake seems properly supervised, whether you maintain your yard. She's building ammunition against you." Then came the bombshell that changed everything. She pulled the same stunt on me 2 years ago, said my garden shed violated setback requirements. I'm 68 years old, David. I paid her $2,000 rather than fight. After hanging up, I spent the night researching Ohio lien law on my laptop, the blue glow burning my exhausted eyes. That's when I discovered something that made me sit bolt upright. Back in trade school, our instructor always said, "Know the code before you pull the wire." Turns out HOA liens follow the same principle. You better understand the legal requirements before you file the paperwork. Ohio law was crystal clear. HOA liens require proper legal notification with a 45-day cure period. Linda had jumped straight to lien filing. Her entire threat was built on quicksand, and she was betting a blue-collar electrician wouldn't know the difference. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office basement. The place smelled like decades of moldering documents and shattered hopes. But buried in those files, I found Linda's critical error. Her lien was missing 4 required legal attachments. She'd cut corners because she assumed a working-class electrician wouldn't understand property law. Wrong calculation. I photocopied everything, filed my formal challenge, and walked out with my first legal victory coursing through my veins like clean electricity. But Linda was nowhere near finished. She called an emergency board session to clarify window standards. When I arrived at the community center, the atmosphere itself felt different, charged with Linda's desperation and that perpetual burnt coffee stench. "The board has determined that previous approvals were issued in error," she announced, reading from prepared notes. "All non-conforming windows must be replaced within 90 days. I stood up, my work boots echoing on the linoleum. "You can't retroactively invalidate approvals, Linda. That's breach of contract. Mr. Martinez, you're out of order. No, you're out of bounds." I held up my research like a winning hand. "Your lien is void. You never provided proper legal notice under state statute." Linda's face cycled through pale, then crimson, then something approaching violet. "This meeting is adjourned." But the damage was spreading. I'd humiliated her in front of the remaining board members, and Linda Crawford collected grudges like some people collect antiques. The payback came immediately. A debt collection agency started harassing me, Midwest Recovery Services, some outfit from Cleveland that specialized in intimidating homeowners. "Mr. Martinez, you owe $3,400. We can garnish wages and freeze bank accounts." That lien is invalid. I filed a legal challenge. Our client disagrees. Sleep became impossible. Jake noticed during dinner his 14-year-old intuition too sharp for comfort. "Dad, you look stressed. What's happening?" "How do you explain that the neighborhood tyrant is trying to steal your house?" I pulled him into a hug instead. "Just some boring paperwork stuff, buddy." That's when I started my documentation crusade. I transformed the garage into a war room, timeline covering one wall, copies of every document, photos of windows throughout the neighborhood. If Linda wanted to play games, I'd master the rules better than she knew them. The breakthrough came when I started analyzing her enforcement patterns. 52 houses with identical windows, but the violations followed a sinister pattern. Every targeted homeowner was either a renter, minority, or working class, like me. Linda's golf club friends received polite reminders for identical violations. I was staring at systematic discrimination disguised as community protection. Then Linda deployed her nuclear weapon, an expensive HOA attorney from Cleveland. His first letter arrived on letterhead that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. Demand for immediate compliance and payment of all outstanding fines, now totaling $4,200. Linda was escalating, betting financial pressure would crush me. She had no idea she was teaching an electrician how to trace the biggest power failure in neighborhood history. Linda's high-priced Cleveland attorney didn't believe in gentle persuasion. His letter arrived on ivory letterhead that probably cost more per page than I earned per hour. Notice of intent to foreclose. Your client has 45 days to satisfy all outstanding obligations or face sheriff's auction. Sheriff's auction. The words hit me like grabbing a live wire without gloves. That weekend, I grabbed my camera and measuring tape for the most crucial electrical job of my career. Except instead of tracing circuits, I was documenting discrimination. House by house, window by window, I photographed every vinyl replacement in Maplewood Heights. The smell of October leaves crunched under my boots as I walked streets I thought I understood. What I uncovered made my blood boil. 52 houses with identical windows to mine. Mrs. Patterson on Oak Drive, married to the city attorney, had the exact same brand, same style, installed the same week as mine. Not only did she avoid violations, the HOA newsletter actually featured her community-minded improvements. 4 blocks over, Roberto Santos got hammered with fines for identical windows. His crime? Being a landscaper who rented instead of owned. Linda's violation notice called his windows inconsistent with neighborhood character standards. Same windows, different treatment. The pattern was unmistakable. Back home, my garage transformed into something between a detective's evidence room and an electrician's diagnostic station. Photos covered every wall, connected with colored wire to a neighborhood map. Blue markers for Linda's friends who got warnings. Red markers for people like me who got fines. The red markers told a story that made my hands shake with rage. Wednesday evening, Betty Rodriguez called in a whisper. "David, I found something you need to see. Can you come over discreetly?" Betty's living room smelled like chamomile tea and decades of quiet suffering. She handed me a manila envelope with trembling fingers, her eyes darting toward the windows like Linda might be surveillance. I saved everything from my garden shed battle 2 years ago. I thought maybe someday, someone stronger than me might need this. Inside that envelope was dynamite disguised as correspondence. Email chains between Linda and board members that would make a civil rights attorney's pulse race. One email stopped my breathing. "We need to be tactical about enforcement. Target renters and blue-collar residents first. They're less likely to have legal resources for pushback." Legal resources. Linda had profiled me from day one, assuming a widowed electrician couldn't afford justice. "Betty, why didn't you fight this? This is textbook discrimination evidence." Her weathered hand smoothed the envelope closed. "Because I'm a 68-year-old Latina widow and Linda Crawford runs this place like her personal dictatorship. Who would have believed me?" That night, I researched fair housing law until my eyes burned from screen glare. Turns out selective HOA enforcement based on race or economic status violates federal civil rights laws. Not just HOA rules, but actual felonies with real prison sentences. Linda wasn't just being a neighborhood bully, she was operating an illegal discrimination enterprise. The next morning, I called Ohio Legal Aid with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The intake specialist's voice brightened when I described my evidence collection. "Sir, if you can prove systematic patterns, this becomes a federal fair housing violation. How much documentation do you have?" 4 boxes full with photos and timelines going back 6 years. "Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone. We're assigning an attorney today." Maria Gonzalez met me 3 days later in a conference room that smelled like fresh hope and strong coffee. She spread my photos across the table like a royal flush, her eyes lighting up with each piece of evidence. "David, this is textbook housing discrimination, selective enforcement, economic profiling, racial targeting. Linda violated approximately 8 federal statutes." Maria leaned forward, tapping the timeline I'd constructed. "She made one critical mistake picking an electrician to intimidate." "What's that?" "Electricians know how to trace problems to their source. Most people see individual violations. You documented the entire corrupt network." But Linda wasn't surrendering. Her attorney filed for emergency foreclosure, claiming I posed imminent community threat. The expedited hearing was scheduled for Monday, 4 days away. Jake found me Sunday night surrounded by legal documents and cold coffee, preparing for the battle of our lives. "Dad, you look terrified. Is someone really trying to steal our house?" I pulled him close, breathing in his teenage shampoo. "Remember when that bully Kevin kept taking your lunch money until you finally told the vice principal?" "Yeah, and he got detention for 2 weeks. Sometimes bullies don't stop until someone forces them to stop. Linda's been taking people's lunch money for years through these fake violations. Tomorrow I'm telling the principal." Jake squeezed my hand. "Good. Kevin needed that lesson too." Monday morning arrived cold and overcast. Walking into that courthouse, carrying 4 boxes of evidence, I spotted Linda across the hallway with her expensive suit and arrogant smirk. She thought she was fighting a frightened electrician. She had no idea she was about to face a federal civil rights lawsuit. The courtroom felt arctic, but sweat still rolled down my back as Judge Michael Rodriguez reviewed the case files. Linda sat rigid beside her attorney, radiating the confidence of someone who'd never lost a legal fight to a blue-collar worker. She was about to learn that confidence and competence aren't synonymous. "Your Honor," Linda's attorney began, "Mr. Martinez has flagrantly violated community covenants for 20 months. The HOA has demonstrated extraordinary patience, but continued defiance threatens neighborhood stability." Extraordinary patience. I nearly burst out laughing. Then it was Maria Gonzalez's turn. She rose slowly like a gunfighter in an old western and dropped the first bombshell. Your Honor, we're filing a federal fair housing counter-lawsuit. The evidence demonstrates systematic discrimination targeting minority and working-class residents. Maria opened my first evidence box. We have documented proof of selective enforcement spanning 6 years. Judge Rodriguez's eyebrows shot up. Linda's attorney went ashen. This wasn't supposed to be about discrimination. This was supposed to be simple HOA foreclosure. But the real earthquake came when Maria presented Betty Rodriguez's email envelope. Your Honor, we have internal HOA communications explicitly discussing targeting strategies based on residents' economic status and likelihood to mount legal resistance. She read Linda's email aloud. Target renters and blue-collar residents first. They're less likely to have legal resources for pushback. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the stenographer stopped typing momentarily. Judge Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression shifting from routine boredom to sharp attention. Linda's face cycled through confusion, panic, then something approaching fury. She leaned over to whisper frantically at her attorney, but the damage was spreading like electrical fire through dry timber. Your Honor, Maria continued, 52 houses in Maplewood Heights have identical window installations, 0 violations for residents connected to the HOA president, 100% enforcement against minority and working-class homeowners. Judge Rodriguez called a 45-minute recess. Linda's attorney spent those 45 minutes on his phone, probably calling his malpractice insurance provider. When court resumed, the judge's tone had completely transformed. This court is gravely concerned by allegations of discriminatory enforcement. Mr. Martinez, your foreclosure case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm ordering a comprehensive investigation of HOA practices and referring this matter to the federal attorney's office. Linda's world collapsed in real time. The confident smirk dissolved into something resembling terror as she realized this wasn't just about my house anymore. Federal attorneys meant criminal charges. Criminal charges meant prison time. Walking out of that courthouse felt like the first sunrise after a year-long storm. But Linda wasn't finished. Desperate people do desperate things. The harassment intensified immediately. Anonymous complaints flooded the city about my unlicensed electrical work at home. Code enforcement appeared 4 times in 3 weeks, finding nothing but costing me lost workdays for mandatory inspections. Someone, I couldn't prove it was Linda, but please, reported my work truck for commercial vehicle violations in a residential zone. Parking tickets materialized like magic even when I was parked legally. Then came the phone calls, heavy breathing, hang-ups, threats mumbled in disguised voices. Drop the lawsuit or you'll lose more than money. Classic intimidation tactics that might have worked on someone without 4 boxes of federal evidence. The breaking point came when Jake called me sobbing from school. Someone had contacted his guidance counselor with concerns about his home environment and possible neglect due to father's legal troubles. They dragged my 14-year-old son into their war. That night, I sat in my evidence garage, staring at 6 years' worth of Linda's documented abuse. Phone records, emails, violation patterns, financial manipulation. She'd been operating Maplewood Heights like her personal empire, driving out anyone who didn't fit her vision of proper residence. But buried in those records, I discovered something that changed everything. Property tax records showed Linda owned 4 rental houses in Maplewood through an LLC called LC Properties, properties she'd never disclosed to the HOA board despite clear conflict of interest requirements, properties that had identical window violations she'd ignored for her own financial benefit. One of those rental properties had the exact same windows I'd been fined for. Not similar, identical, same manufacturer, same style, installed by the same contractor. Linda hadn't just been discriminating against working-class residents. She'd been manipulating property values to benefit her real estate investment portfolio. The scope of her corruption was staggering. Selective enforcement drove down property values, creating buying opportunities for her investment LLC. She'd been systematically gaming the housing market using HOA authority as her weapon. I called Maria Gonzalez at home. I found it, the smoking gun that connects everything. What did you find? Linda owns rental property in the neighborhood, property with the exact windows she's been fining other people for installing. Maria's silence stretched for a long moment. Then, David, you just turned this from a discrimination case into a federal racketeering investigation. Linda's been running a criminal enterprise. Linda Crawford thought she was fighting a simple electrician over some windows. She had no idea she'd just awakened a federal task force. 4 weeks after the federal referral, I was sitting in my evidence garage at 2 a.m. when the pieces finally snapped into place. Sometimes the biggest discoveries happen when you're not searching for them, like finding a ground fault in the last place you'd think to check. I'd been digging through 6 years of county property records, cross-referencing HOA board decisions with real estate transactions. The smell of burnt coffee filled the garage as my printer worked overtime, churning out deed transfers and tax assessments. That's when I found the shell company. LC Properties LLC, registered in Delaware, had purchased 5 properties in Maplewood Heights over the past 5 years. The registered agent was listed as Lawrence Crawford, Linda's husband, but the real shocker was the timing of these purchases. Every single property had been bought within 8 months of receiving major HOA violations. The Santos house on Maple Street. Roberto got slammed with window fines, deck violations, and landscaping citations. The stress drove his family to sell below market value. LC Properties swooped in with a cash offer 25% under asking price. The Johnson rental on Pine Avenue. Elderly couple got cited for fence height, shed placement, and excessive holiday decorations. After 20 months of escalating fines, they sold to avoid foreclosure. Again, LC Properties bought at a massive discount. The Williams property next to Betty, her late husband's workshop, supposedly violated residential use standards. The harassment continued until Betty's son convinced her to sell and move to senior living. Guess who bought it? My hands literally shook as I traced the money trail. Linda hadn't just been discriminating against working-class residents. She'd been systematically terrorizing homeowners to create investment opportunities for her family's real estate empire. But the smoking gun was sitting right there in the property files. 3247 Elm Street, purchased by LC Properties 20 months ago for $38,000 below market value. According to the listing photos, this house had the exact same vinyl windows I'd been fined for, not similar windows, identical, same manufacturer, same color, same grid pattern, installed by the same contractor. Linda had been collecting rent on a property with the illegal windows she was trying to foreclose on me for installing. The violation records told the whole story. The previous owners, an elderly couple named the Washingtons, had received their first window citation 4 years ago. The fines escalated monthly, $750, $500, $3,000, until they faced foreclosure. Rather than lose everything, they sold to the first cash buyer, LC Properties. Linda's signature was on every violation notice, every fine escalation, every board decision that drove the Washingtons into financial panic. Then I found the insurance records that made my blood boil. LC Properties had filed a homeowner's insurance claim for storm damage to those same windows 8 months after purchase. They'd collected $12,000 for replacing windows that supposedly violated HOA standards. Linda had been running a protection racket disguised as community standards enforcement. The scope was breathtaking. Over 5 years, LC Properties had acquired properties worth $520,000 at 65 cents on the dollar, a profit of $182,000 through systematic HOA harassment. Every targeted homeowner fit the same profile: elderly, minority, working class, or rental properties. People without resources to fight extended legal battles. People who would sell cheap rather than face foreclosure. I cross-referenced Linda's real estate license with the property sales. She'd been the listing agent on 3 of the distressed sales, collecting commission on properties her HOA harassment had devalued, double-dipping on her own corruption. But the most damning evidence was an email I found in the county's electronic filing system. Linda had submitted a complaint about declining property values due to non-conforming improvements. The same month her LLC bought the Santos house. She'd literally cited her own discrimination as justification for below-market property acquisition. Federal investigators love patterns, and Linda had gifted them a 6-year timeline of criminal enterprise: conspiracy, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, racketeering. She'd violated enough federal laws to stock a small prison. I called Maria Gonzalez at 7 a.m., knowing she'd want to hear this immediately. "Maria, I found the mother lode. Linda's been operating a real estate scam using HOA authority." "We're not just talking discrimination anymore. What are we talking about?" "Criminal conspiracy spanning 6 years and over $500,000 in fraudulent property manipulation. Linda thought she was collecting rent checks. She was actually collecting federal evidence." The morning after my discovery, Maria Gonzalez called an emergency meeting. Her law office conference room smelled like fresh hope and impending justice as she spread my property research across a table that had probably seen its share of David versus Goliath battles. "David, what you've uncovered isn't just HOA abuse, it's organized crime." Maria's eyes gleamed with the intensity of a prosecutor who'd found her white whale. "Linda's been operating a systematic racketeering operation using municipal authority as her weapon." Within hours, she'd assembled what looked like a legal strike team. Robert Kim, a forensic accountant who specialized in financial fraud. Sarah Williams, a federal housing discrimination expert. And the heavy artillery, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, who prosecuted public corruption cases for the Northern District of Ohio. The strategy session felt like watching a master electrician plan a complex installation. Every connection mapped, every circuit traced, every potential failure point identified. "Here's how we dismantle Linda's operation," Maria explained, pointing to a timeline that now covered an entire wall. Federal RICO charges require proving a pattern of criminal activity. We have 6 years of systematic property manipulation. That's our pattern. Robert, the forensic accountant, had been analyzing Elsie Properties' financial records with the enthusiasm of someone who lived for spreadsheet detective work. The money trail is beautiful in its stupidity, he announced. Linda and Lawrence use the same bank account for HOA fees and rental property purchases. Every property acquisition directly correlates with HOA enforcement actions. But we needed more than financial records. We needed victims willing to testify, and that meant tracking down people Linda had driven away. Betty Rodriguez became our secret weapon. Despite being 68 and terrified of Linda's retaliation, she'd kept detailed records of every neighborhood harassment campaign. More importantly, she'd maintained friendships with families who'd fled Maplewood. The Washingtons moved to Columbus after Linda destroyed them, Betty whispered during one of our kitchen table strategy sessions. The Santos family went back to Mexico, the Johnson family relocated to Florida, but they all kept documentation because they knew something wasn't right. I spent the next week playing detective, tracking down former neighbors across 4 states. Each phone call revealed the same pattern: systematic harassment followed by forced sale to LC Properties. The Washingtons wept when I explained that their harassment hadn't been random bad luck, but calculated criminal targeting. We lost everything, Mr. Washington told me over a scratchy phone connection. 45 years building equity gone because we couldn't afford lawyers to fight fake violations. Sarah Williams, our housing expert, was building the federal discrimination case with methodical precision. She'd analyzed demographics of every HOA enforcement action going back 10 years. The statistics were damning. 96% of major violations targeted minority or working-class families. 0 enforcement against country club members or real estate professionals. Linda didn't just discriminate, Sarah explained. She weaponized discrimination for profit. That elevates this from civil rights violation to criminal conspiracy. Meanwhile, Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh was coordinating with FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Turns out Linda's operation had triggered multiple federal databases: wire fraud alerts from suspicious property transfers, mail fraud flags from HOA violation notices, banking irregularities from cash transactions exceeding reporting thresholds. She's been on our radar for 8 months, Walsh admitted. Your case provides the missing piece: proof of criminal intent and systematic operation. The evidence organization took over my entire garage. 4 long tables covered with chronological timelines, property records, financial transactions, and victim testimonies. It looked like a crime lab, complete with red string connecting related incidents. Jake helped after school, his teenage attention to detail, perfect for cross-referencing dates and dollar amounts. Dad, Linda's like a really evil landlord who creates her own distressed properties, he observed while highlighting bank transfers. That's exactly what she is, buddy. But the most satisfying moment came when we tracked down Linda's real estate license history. Turns out she'd faced disciplinary action in 2016 for undisclosed conflicts of interest, selling property to her own relatives without proper disclosure. The Real Estate Commission had suspended her license for 9 months. Linda was a repeat offender who'd learned to hide her schemes better. Maria was preparing a lawsuit that read like a John Grisham thriller. Federal RICO charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, conspiracy, tax evasion, and about 15 other felonies I couldn't pronounce. The damage calculations alone ran to 7 figures. We're not just seeking compensation for you, Maria explained. We're dismantling a 10-year criminal enterprise and establishing precedent for HOA accountability nationwide. The plan was elegant in its simplicity: present Linda with irrefutable evidence of her criminal operation, offer one chance for settlement before federal prosecutors filed charges, let her choose between paying massive damages or facing 25 years in federal prison. Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh smiled when Maria outlined our strategy. I love cases where the defendant documented their own crimes. Linda's been building our prosecution case for 6 years. 4 months of investigation had revealed the truth. Linda Crawford wasn't just a neighborhood bully, she was the head of a criminal organization that happened to masquerade as an HOA. Linda's desperation manifested like a power surge, throwing sparks in all directions. The morning after news broke about the federal investigation, I found a private investigator parked outside my house. Some sketchy guy in a beat-up Honda taking photos of Jake getting on the school bus. That crossed every line I had. I walked straight to his car window, my work boots crunching on gravel loud enough to wake the neighborhood. You want to explain why you're photographing my 14-year-old son? The PI rolled down his window, cigarette smoke billowing out like guilty conscience. Just doing a job, pal. Public street, public photography. Whose job? He smirked and drove off without answering. But I didn't need confirmation. Linda was playing private investigator games now, digging for dirt that didn't exist. By noon, the harassment campaign was in full swing. The PI had visited 4 neighbors asking about my fitness as a parent and whether Jake seemed neglected due to his father's legal troubles. Betty Rodriguez called immediately. David, some horrible man was asking if you drink too much, if you have strange visitors, if Jake looks properly fed and clothed. Betty's voice shook with indignation. I told him to get off my property before I called police. Linda's strategy was transparent. If you can't win on facts, destroy your opponent's reputation. But she'd underestimated Maplewood's transformation. The neighbors she'd terrorized for years had found their backbone. Mrs. Patterson from Oak Drive, the city attorney's wife, called that evening. David, that investigator tried to pump me for information about your character. I told him you're the best neighbor we've ever had, and if he came back, my husband would have courthouse security escort him off the property. Even more satisfying was the call from Roberto Santos back from Mexico for a visit. Hey man, some PI was asking about you. I told him you helped me fix my electrical panel for free 2 winters ago, and anyone messing with you was messing with the whole neighborhood. The community Linda had spent years dividing was uniting against her. But Linda wasn't finished with her bag of dirty tricks. Wednesday morning brought a visit from Child Protective Services. A well-meaning social worker named Ms. Henderson stood on my doorstep with a clipboard and genuine concern. Mr. Martinez, we received an anonymous report about possible neglect. Someone claimed your son appears malnourished and your home environment is unstable due to ongoing legal issues. I invited her in for coffee and showed her my evidence garage, now transformed into a federal case command center. Ms. Henderson's eyes widened as she took in the organized timeline, professional legal documents, and systematic approach to fighting corruption. Sir, whoever reported this was either misinformed or malicious. Your home shows clear evidence of a devoted parent fighting for his family's rights. She closed her notepad. Case dismissed. And between you and me, keep fighting the good fight. Linda's attacks were backfiring spectacularly. Thursday brought the financial warfare. Someone, again, couldn't prove it, but come on, reported my electrical business to the state licensing board for operating without proper credentials and performing unsafe work in residential areas. The inspector who showed up was a guy named Tom Rodriguez, 25-year veteran who'd seen every scam in the book. He spent an hour reviewing my license, insurance, work permits, and customer references. David, your paperwork's cleaner than most contractors I inspect. Someone's playing games with you. Tom shook his head. I'm noting this as a frivolous complaint filed with malicious intent. That goes on the record. By Friday, Linda's desperation reached peak stupidity. She attempted to have my work truck towed from my own driveway, claiming it violated residential parking ordinances. The towing company called me for confirmation before hooking up. Sir, we've got a woman here demanding we tow your vehicle, but you're parked legally on your own property. She seems pretty agitated. You want us to call police? Yes, please do. 30 minutes later, Officer Maria Santos, no relation to Roberto, was writing Linda a citation for filing false reports and harassment. Watching Linda try to explain her actions to a uniformed police officer while neighbors gathered on their porches was the most entertainment Maplewood had seen in years. Ma'am, this is your 4th complaint this week involving Mr. Martinez. I'm recommending you seek legal counsel about harassment laws before this escalates further. That evening, Maria Gonzalez called with an update that made my week. Linda's attorney has been contacting our office daily asking about settlement discussions. They know the federal case is airtight. What are they offering? Started at $15,000. Now they're at $60,000 plus her resignation from all HOA positions. Maria's satisfaction was audible. Linda's hemorrhaging money on legal fees and private investigators while her case gets weaker by the hour. But the most telling sign of Linda's panic came Sunday morning. Jake spotted her driving slowly past our house at dawn, staring at the federal evidence warning signs Maria had posted in our windows. Dad, she looks scared. Linda Crawford should be scared. She'd spent 10 years terrorizing neighbors with impunity. Now she was discovering what it felt like to be the target. Linda's final gambit arrived on a Tuesday morning that started normal and ended with police sirens. I was having coffee when Officer Santos knocked on my door, her expression apologetic but official. David, I hate to do this, but Linda Crawford filed a restraining order petition claiming you've been stalking and threatening her. Judge Williams wants to see you in chambers at 3 p.m. Stalking. The woman who'd hired a PI to photograph my son was claiming I was stalking her. Officer Santos, I've got security cameras covering my entire property. Want to see 10 weeks of footage proving I haven't been anywhere near Linda's house? Save it for the judge. But between us, her story has more holes than a bad wire job. At the courthouse, Linda sat beside a new attorney, her 5th one since this started. She'd clearly spent money on appearance coaching because the confident real estate queen had been replaced by a trembling victim in conservative clothing and minimal makeup. Your Honor, her attorney began, my client has endured months of harassment from Mr. Martinez. He's been photographing her property, following her to work, and making threatening phone calls. Judge Williams looked skeptical. Do you have evidence of these activities? Well, Your Honor, my client fears for her safety based on his aggressive behavior and the federal investigation he initiated. Maria Gonzalez stood slowly, her briefcase clicking open like a gunshot. Your Honor, we have comprehensive evidence proving these allegations are fabricated. Security footage, phone records, GPS data from Mr. Martinez's work vehicle, and witness statements. She handed the judge a thumb drive. Everything is time-stamped and verified. During the alleged stalking incidents, Mr. Martinez was either at work sites 30 miles away or at home with his son. Judge Williams reviewed the evidence for 20 minutes while Linda's face cycled through various shades of panic. Finally, he looked up with the expression of someone who'd seen too many frivolous lawsuits. Ms. Crawford, filing false police reports is a crime. Your petition is denied, and I'm recommending the prosecutor's office review your complaint for possible perjury charges. Linda's attorney whispered frantically in her ear, but the damage was spreading like electrical fire through wet insulation. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like I dodged a bullet. But desperate people with nothing left to lose become dangerous in unpredictable ways. The escalation came that same evening. Jake called me at work, his voice tight with controlled fear. Dad, someone broke into our house, nothing stolen, but all your evidence boxes are torn apart, papers everywhere. I broke every speed limit getting home. The evidence garage looked like a tornado had hit it, documents scattered, photos torn from walls, computer equipment smashed. But whoever did this wasn't a professional burglar. They'd missed the backup drives hidden in my bedroom closet and the duplicate files stored at Maria's office. Officer Santos arrived within minutes of my call, her flashlight cutting through the chaos. This wasn't random vandalism. Someone was looking for specific documents. She photographed the destruction. Any idea who might want to destroy evidence in a federal case? Just one person desperate enough to risk felony breaking and entering. But Linda had made her biggest mistake yet. In her panic to destroy evidence, she'd left behind evidence of evidence destruction. Federal prosecutors love obstruction of justice charges. They're easy to prove and carry serious prison time. The next morning brought Linda's most pathetic attempt at intimidation. A process server delivered papers claiming LC Properties was suing me for defamation and business interference. They wanted $300,000 in damages for false accusations harming their real estate investments. Maria Gonzalez laughed when I showed her the lawsuit. David, this is beautiful. Linda's admitting under oath that she owns LC Properties and that our federal investigation is harming her business. She just confessed to the criminal conspiracy we've been proving. How is that helpful? Because federal prosecutors can now use her own lawsuit as evidence of criminal intent. She's literally suing us for exposing her crimes. But the final straw came Thursday evening. Jake was studying at the kitchen table when someone threw a brick through our front window. Attached was a note in block letters. Drop the lawsuit or lose more than windows. That crossed from harassment into terrorism. I called 911, then Maria, then Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh. Within an hour, FBI agents were processing the crime scene while neighbors gathered to offer support. Mrs. Patterson brought Jake hot chocolate. Roberto Santos offered to install security cameras. Betty Rodriguez stood guard with a baseball bat like a 68-year-old bodyguard. Mr. Martinez, FBI agent Sarah Kim said while photographing the brick, we're treating this as witness intimidation in a federal case. That's a separate felony carrying up to 25 years. Linda had just graduated from HOA corruption to federal terrorism charges. The next morning, Agent Kim called with news that made my entire year. We arrested Linda Crawford at 7 a.m. Federal charges, racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation. What's she looking at? 45 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts. Linda Crawford had finally met an authority figure she couldn't intimidate, the United States Department of Justice. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday that felt like Christmas morning, and Judgment Day rolled into one. Word had spread through Maplewood faster than gossip at a family reunion. Linda Crawford's federal arrest had made the evening news, and everyone wanted front row seats for the finale. I arrived at the community center 45 minutes early to find the parking lot already packed. Cars lined the street for 4 blocks, and I spotted license plates from neighboring counties. This wasn't just a Maplewood event anymore. This was regional entertainment. The community center buzzed with an energy I'd never felt before. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with anticipation as neighbors who'd barely spoken in years clustered together, sharing Linda horror stories like war veterans comparing battle scars. David! Betty Rodriguez waved me over to the front row where she'd saved seats like we were attending a Broadway show. Channel 12 is here, and that reporter from the Plain Dealer, even the county prosecutor came. Maria Gonzalez arrived carrying a leather briefcase and the satisfied expression of someone about to deliver professional justice. She set up at the presenter's table while photographers positioned themselves for optimal shots. At exactly 7:30 p.m., the remaining HOA board members filed in looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Board Secretary Helen Morrison called the meeting to order with a voice that shook like autumn leaves. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight to address recent developments regarding former HOA President Linda Crawford. The crowd fell silent except for camera shutters clicking like mechanical insects. Due to criminal charges filed by federal prosecutors, Linda Crawford has resigned all HOA positions effective immediately. Helen's prepared statement rattled in her hands. The board extends apologies to any residents who experienced inappropriate enforcement actions. Inappropriate enforcement actions. Even now, they couldn't say the word discrimination. Maria Gonzalez stood, her heels clicking across the linoleum like a countdown timer. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here tonight representing not just David Martinez, but every family Linda Crawford targeted over the past 10 years. She opened her briefcase with theatrical precision, pulling out a settlement check that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Linda Crawford's criminal enterprise has been dismantled by federal authorities. Tonight, we're here to announce the terms of her civil settlement. The crowd leaned forward collectively, the silence so complete you could hear the building's air conditioning cycling on. $75,000 in damages to David Martinez for harassment, discrimination, and attempted theft of property through fraudulent HOA enforcement. Applause erupted like a dam bursting. Jake, sitting beside Betty, clapped so hard his hands probably hurt. Even the news cameras captured neighbors hugging and cheering like their team had won the World Series. But Maria wasn't finished. Additionally, Linda Crawford is permanently banned from any HOA leadership position in Ohio. LC Properties LLC has been dissolved, with all illegally acquired properties returned to fair market value through court-supervised sales. More applause, but Maria raised her hand for silence. Most importantly, this case has established legal precedent for HOA accountability. No board member in Ohio can ever again use community authority for personal financial gain without facing federal prosecution. That's when I stood up, my work boots loud on the floor as I walked to the microphone. The room fell silent again, but this time it felt different, respectful, supportive. 10 months ago, I thought I was fighting one woman over some windows. Tonight, I realized we were fighting for something much bigger. I looked around the packed room, seeing faces that had transformed from fearful to empowered. We proved that ordinary people can defeat corruption when they document everything, build community support, and refuse to back down. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. Even the county prosecutor applauded, probably calculating how this precedent would protect his own constituents. Channel 12's reporter approached afterward, her cameraman capturing the check presentation. "Mr. Martinez, what's your message for other homeowners facing HOA abuse? Document everything, build alliances, and remember, bullies count on you staying isolated and afraid. When communities unite, corruption crumbles." The celebration continued in the parking lot. Neighbors planning the first annual Freedom from Harassment Day festival. Roberto Santos announced he was running for HOA president on a platform of transparent governance. Mrs. Patterson offered to host a legal rights workshop in her backyard, but the sweetest moment came when Jake hugged me beside my truck, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "Dad, I'm proud of you. You didn't just fight for our house, you fought for everyone." Looking around at neighbors who were laughing instead of hiding, planning instead of fearing, I realized Jake was right. This hadn't been about windows or violations or even $75,000. This had been about proving that in America, justice isn't just for people who can afford expensive lawyers. Sometimes justice is for electricians with cameras, elderly neighbors with manila envelopes, and teenagers who believe their fathers can change the world. Linda Crawford had spent 10 years teaching our neighborhood to be afraid. We just taught her that fear works both ways. 8 months later, I'm standing in my backyard watching Jake practice his college application presentation. The same windows that started this whole mess sparkling in the afternoon sunlight. The settlement money transformed more than just my bank account. It transformed an entire community. The Maplewood Heights Scholarship Fund, established with $30,000 from the settlement, awarded its first grants last month. Jake won $750 for his essay about standing up to injustice, which he'll use toward his pre-law program at Case Western Reserve University. Turns out watching your father fight corruption makes quite an impression on a teenager's career goals. "Dad, listen to this part," Jake calls out, reading from his laptop. "My father taught me that documentation beats intimidation, community beats corruption, and ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they refuse to stay silent." Pride swells in my chest like clean voltage flowing through perfect wiring. The playground improvements funded by $20,000 in settlement money opened last week with a ribbon-cutting ceremony that drew 400 residents. Children who'd spent years tiptoeing around Linda's violation threats now play freely while their parents organize movie nights and block parties without fear of retribution. Roberto Santos won the HOA presidency by a landslide, running on a platform of transparent governance and equal enforcement. His first act was implementing monthly financial reporting and requiring board member conflict of interest disclosures. The second was commissioning a bronze plaque for the community center, in honor of those who stand against corruption. Betty Rodriguez leads garden tours now, proudly displaying the roses that Linda once banned. David taught us that standing up to bullies isn't just about yourself, she tells visitors. It's about protecting the next person who might get targeted. The Legal Defense Fund, seeded with $15,000 from my settlement, has already helped 5 families in neighboring counties fight HOA abuse. Maria Gonzalez jokes that my case created a cottage industry in HOA accountability law. Other attorneys across Ohio now reference Martinez precedent when fighting discriminatory enforcement. Linda's aftermath reads like a cautionary tale written by federal prosecutors. She plea bargained to avoid trial, receiving 4 years in federal prison plus 6 years supervised probation. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. LC Properties dissolved, and all illegally acquired properties sold at court-supervised auctions. The Santos family used restitution money to buy back their original house, which had sat empty since Linda's arrest. Roberto called me last week, his voice thick with emotion. David, we never thought we'd see justice. Thank you for fighting when we couldn't. Ohio House, Bill 312, the HOA Transparency Act, passed the legislature in April with unanimous bipartisan support. The law requires conflict disclosure, limits foreclosure authority, and establishes renter rights for tenants in HOA communities. I testified at the bill signing, sitting beside Governor DeWine as he signed legislation that will protect thousands of families from future Linda Crawfords. My electrician business has quadrupled, partly because homeowners throughout central Ohio want to hire the guy who took down the corrupt HOA, but mostly because word spreads when you help neighbors fix problems instead of creating them. The annual Maplewood Freedom Festival happens next month, featuring live music, food trucks, and booths where residents share HOA reform resources. Jake's organizing a voter registration drive because he learned that civic engagement beats passive compliance every single time. My evidence garage has become a local museum of sorts. Neighbors bring their kids to see the timeline and documents that dismantled a 10-year reign of terror. This is what happens when good people document bad behavior, I tell them. But the sweetest victory is the simplest one. Last weekend, a young couple with 3 small children bought the house where the Santos family once lived in fear. They knocked on my door asking about the neighborhood, and I could honestly tell them this is a community where people look out for each other. That's what we built from the ashes of Linda's corruption. A real community. The website hoabusesurvivors.org gets 75,000 visitors monthly now, downloading template documents and legal resources. My story has inspired similar fights across the country, proving that one person's courage multiplies exponentially when others follow the example. If you've survived HOA harassment, drop your story in the comments below. Share this video with anyone facing neighborhood bullies. Your engagement helps other victims find hope and resources. Hit subscribe for more David versus Goliath victories, because sometimes the little guy wins when he's armed with patience, documentation, and an entire community that refuses to stay silent. Remember, bullies count on isolation, communities create accountability, and sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be afraid. Justice tastes even sweeter when it's shared with neighbors who've become family. From all of us here at HOA Stories, thanks so much for watching today's HOA Linda Meltdown. If you enjoyed seeing neighbors stand their ground and karma catch up, smash that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA drama we bring you.